Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you so much for being here. I'd first of all like to thank my colleagues joining me today, Carlos Leitão, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry and the Minister responsible for Canada Economic Development for Quebec regions, and Evan Solomon, the Minister responsible for FedDev. You know, in a rapidly changing world, Canada's new government is focused on what we can control, and that means strengthening our trade relationships abroad, but at the same time, building a stronger, more resilient economy here at home, and being our own best customers. One of the most effective ways of doing that is by making it easier for Canadian businesses to do business with each other across provincial boundaries and territorial boundaries. That's why I'm so pleased today to announce the launch of the Domestic Trade Commissioners Network. And this is an initiative led by my department, Prairies Can, that brings together representatives from all 7 of Canada's regional development agencies, we call them RDAs, in partnership with provinces and territories. The network is really about turning the idea of one Canadian economy into something practical and tangible and helpful for businesses. So by leveraging RDA's existing relationships, we can help small and medium-sized businesses make new connections across the country and access opportunities. And they could be anything from a domestic trade mission to some type of a business event. And this is a really natural fit for our RDAs because in each of our regions, we work really closely with small and medium-sized businesses. We support their growth and we support their innovation and their diversification. And so for Prairies Can, leading this initiative makes sense. Our mandate and our reach already spans 3 provinces, and we have a strong track record of facilitating interprovincial business and making connections, helping our businesses make connections. Internal trade is already a major driver of Canada's economy, and each year, more than $530 billion in goods and services moves across provincial and territorial borders, and that's nearly 20% of our GDP. And we know that there's significant room for that number to grow. So if we continue to reduce barriers between regions, there's the potential to unlock an estimated $200 billion in additional economic activity. So we understand the strengths in our region, and we're well positioned in our RDAs to help those businesses turn their strengths into new opportunities, and not just internationally, but right here at home. So the network brings and builds on the important work that Canada's RDAs are already doing to help firms adapt to changing trade realities and succeed really in a so much more competitive business economy. And so at the end of the day, this initiative is really about making Canada's economy more connected and more competitive and more resilient. And it's about helping Canadian businesses grow here in Canada. And it's about continuing to build one strong Canadian economy. Thank you so much, and I'll turn things over now to Parliamentary Secretary Leitão.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you very much. Alors, bonjour tout le monde. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui pour parler des façons dont nous agissons pour faciliter le commerce interprovincial. Parce qu'une économie plus intégrée est une économie qui est plus forte, qui est plus productive et qui est plus résiliente. C'est exactement l'objectif du réseau des délégués au commerce intérieur que nous lançons aujourd'hui. Ce réseau est un moyen d'aider les entreprises canadiennes à mieux connecter entre elles, de faciliter les partenariats et d'ouvrir des occasions d'affaires concrètes pour les PME partout au pays. La collaboration entre le gouvernement fédéral, les provinces et territoires est essentielle pour bâtir une seule économie canadienne plus cohérente et plus compétitive. C'est pourquoi le réseau, coprésidé par le gouvernement du Canada et le gouvernement du Québec, rassemble autour d'une même table chaque province et chaque territoire, ainsi que les 7 agences de développement économique régional qui les desservent. Les agences de développement régional jouent un rôle clé grâce à leur proximité avec les entreprises, la force de leur réseau de collaborateurs et leur connaissance fine des réalités régionales. Il n'est pas question ici de dédoubler des structures, mais bien de simplifier les échanges en complémentarité des rôles et dans le respect des compétences afin de renforcer les efforts existants. Au Québec, par exemple, cette initiative se traduira par des missions commerciales et par la participation de nos entreprises à des événements majeurs partout au pays. Nous pouvons nous appuyer sur des écosystèmes économiques et d'innovation particulièrement solides et bien structurés, notamment dans les secteurs manufacturiers, de l'aérospatial ou de l'agroalimentaire, entre autres. Le réseau des délégués au commerce intérieur est un levier concret pour mieux connecter nos entreprises, renforcer nos chaînes d'approvisionnement et faire circuler les occasions économiques à l'intérieur du Canada. Au final, l'objectif est simple, une économie canadienne plus intégrée, plus forte et plus résiliente, qui crée plus d'occasions pour les entreprises d'ici et le plus de prospérité pour tous. Merci beaucoup.
Donc, en ce moment, nous allons prendre des questions des médias. We'll take questions from the media at this point. Thank you.
Hi, Minister Olszewski. The country obviously is dealing with a number of flood warnings across the country. It is that time of year. I'm wondering, do you have an update with regards to the implementation of the National Flood Insurance Program, and is that something the government's still committed to delivering on?
I can answer that question, absolutely. That's something that we continue to look at, a flood insurance program, and my department and others have been considering it for the last couple of years. What I can tell you, it's an incredibly complicated discussion and a complicated thing to put in place for Canadians, and especially to determine the structure, the most viable structure for such an insurance program. But absolutely, it's top of mind for us at this time.
May I ask, it wasn't in the 2025 budget, and the 2024 budget had, I believe, $15 million for 2025-26, and so I'm just wondering if the government's still working on it, why was it not in the budget?
So we are still working on it, and at the present point in time, we've had, my department and myself have had discussions with the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and it remains an ongoing priority for us.
The 24 budget also said that it would be implemented by 2025. Will that program come by the end of the year?
Yeah, and I can't promise that that will come into effect in the near future, because as I've indicated, it's a very complicated thing to set up. We know that it's top of mind for Canadians because we know that there is some difficulty in some parts of the country in obtaining insurance on account of water events. And, you know, we also know that at this point in time, we are dealing with some flooding situations, potential flooding situations in Manitoba and in other regions as well. And so I should point out, in addition, one of the things that we're trying to help assist Canadians with respect to flooding is flood mapping. And we have a flood mapping program that we're working on, that we're just talking about with provinces and territories at the present time, and that we hope to get operational within the next couple of months. So that will be an important part of how we deal with the flooding issue for Canadians.
Lastly on this measure was always pitched as an affordability measure to help Canadians who couldn't afford flood insurance in their homes, and yet I maybe sense a lack of urgency in your responses here as far as getting it done. And so, considering the Carney government's touting of affordability measures, why isn't this something that has more urgency behind it?
Yeah, and I wouldn't frame it as a lack of urgency on our part. You know, there's a lot of work to do in emergency management, and certainly working on the flooding aspect is one. Preparing for the upcoming wildfire season is another as well. And so, you know, we've been focused on a number of different initiatives, which, as I say, include flood insurance and also a flood portal for the benefit of Canadians coast to coast to coast.
Can I ask who these domestic trade commissioners are going to be and where the money is coming from for them, considering you're cutting jobs in the public service? And if I understand correctly, also international trade commissioners are positions that are also being cut right now. Who are these new domestic people? Who's paying for them?
Do you mean with respect to today's announcement?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there really aren't any new trade commissioners. I want to make sure there isn't any confusion with what I'm saying and what the Prime Minister's announcement was today with respect to the advisory board that will be dealing with Canada-US relations. That's quite separate than this announcement today, which has to do with utilizing existing networks across the country with the assistance of the respective regional development agencies. There'll be a portal. I should explain how it works. There'll be a portal set up, and I believe it will be live today. Businesses can access that portal and say that they're used to getting a particular part from somewhere in the States, but they would want to buy Canadian, in keeping with our Buy Canadian policy. A business can access the portal and ask our officials at our RDA to help connect them with potential suppliers in other parts of Canada. So in that way, we can help keep Canadian businesses purchasing and doing business with other Canadian customers, other Canadian businesses. And the reason this is important is we really haven't had to focus on that in the past. You know, we haven't had to worry about a relationship with our southern neighbor, but we do now. And so strengthening those relationships between businesses across the country will help businesses grow, access services and supplies easier, and basically increase the Canadian economy by having us depend on one another as opposed to international trade and commerce.
What's your perspective on the pipeline discussions that are going on now between the federal government and Alberta and the potential for a southern route for this pipeline as opposed to through the northern BC coast, which is what was envisioned originally?
I can tell you that in general, I think that the discussions are proceeding very, very well. You know, we have an agreement on methane emissions. We have a cooperation agreement. We have the MOU as well. There are ongoing discussions with Alberta. And of course, at the present time, Alberta's the proponent. Alberta won't always be the proponent, I don't believe. And so there will be at some point someone that steps up that wants to build a pipeline, and it will depend on that proponent to determine, in addition to a number of other factors, but certainly the proponent will have some say in what route will be chosen with respect to a proposed pipeline.
Should the federal government be putting any money behind this proposed pipeline?
I'm sorry?
Should the federal government be spending any money on this pipeline?
Well, you know, we've taken the position that we won't be spending money on the pipeline. We're not the proponent. We're looking for, you know, Alberta's looking for a pipeline proponent, and that's all I can say about that at the present time. Thank you.
Just one last one from our Atlantic colleagues with regards to flooding. Is the federal government satisfied with its long-term approach to coordinating responses to flooding, or does it have an update to its existing approach and strategy?
With respect to ongoing flooding?
Flooding response coordination.
So the way that flooding is responded to as at the present time is just as we respond to wildfires. So it's always first and foremost a local response. And then if local capacity is overwhelmed, then the province will step in. In order to engage us federally, we require a formal request, like an RFA, just like for wildfires. I can tell you, though, that with respect to, for example, the Peguis First Nation, we were in contact with the First Nation and with the province of Manitoba, you know, well in advance of any perceived flooding. We knew that there was a potential of flooding, but we were in contact with the province and with the Premier and with Chief Bird, and were able to implement significant flood mitigation measures. My department's also monitoring the situation in Quebec and in Ontario as well, and there hasn't been a formal request for assistance from either one of those provinces, but when and if we receive that, we'll be, of course, quick to respond. In the meantime, I'm having discussions with my counterparts in both of those provinces to make sure we're ready to work with them together in a very proactive way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.